We're here describing the framework from WinDev and to show how easy it is to utilize the features in the framework and actually use in your application. And by the way, my name is Glenn Rathke and Alan Sawyer is here this morning giving us a hand demonstrating this. So what we'll do is run through this and show you the features of the framework, and then there'll be subsequent videos saying how do you do this, how do you do this, those kinds of things. So let's run the framework for right now. And I'm going to log in as myself. Actually, I'm going to log in as Sylvia, and I'll show you why. In the very beginning, this may appear to be a little disjointed, but there's a reason for this, because I wanted to show you the access levels that Sylvia has. And so you can see that she can see the main tab and the user dashboard. Let me log out and run it again. And then actually, as we're seeing this, you'll notice that in the framework you do get a login, so you don't have to go back and create that. Not only do you have the login, but you have a reset password facility. And what that will let you do is you click on that. It then says an email has been generated and it will be sent to your email with a special code. And then you enter that code into the window, and then you're able to reset your password. We also have the same functionality, slightly different, using 2FA. So if once you log in and you have for your company 2FA enabled, it will bring you to a similar screen where it will say that a unique code has been sent to your email. You grab that code, you enter it back in, and then you're able to log into the application and finish what you're doing. Okay, that being said, now let's go log in as Alan, and we'll see what he can look at. Now, you'll notice that he still can see the main tab, but he now can see company and users, and he's got the application settings. Okay, so one more time that we'll log out. This time I'll log in as me. Okay. Now you'll notice that I'm able to see two different tabs in the ribbon bar, and then I still have the same settings because I can go to the application settings, the company, and the users. And you can go to the next tab and have additional functionality here. How I'm envisioning and how I'm using, but I think you could use it any way that you want, is each of these tabs actually represents a different product. Maybe you have a product, a suite of products, and your company or the companies you're selling to them would subscribe to one or multiple. And again, that could be just products, it could be anything that you're choosing to enable at the company level. And we'll look at that. So that's how this works here. Now, let me show you how we've actually implemented this, because the framework will save you tons of hours. You know, if the larger the project, the more hours you're going to save naturally, but you really don't have much to do for creating windows with table controls or your maintenance forms, because the biggest part of that is always having to write your validation. Well, we take care of that for you. So let me show you in its simplest form. And so this is our paradigm here. We go from the main ribbon control down to what we call dashboards. So this would be like your second level of menus, right? And then you could actually have that call another one if you wanted. It's been working well for me just to have these two levels. And so here is my users table. Now, you'll notice that this drop-down combo appeared. And the reason this appeared is in my security role setting, I can enable that I can see all records, okay? Which means then I can select the specific companies that I want to see the data for. And again, what you're looking at is you do not have to do any of this coding. I'm showing you the end result, and we'll go and look at the forms in just a minute and perhaps even create one. But that being said, okay, let's close this. And then I'm going to log back in, and we'll go back in as Sylvia, since we know that she can go to the users and she can also see the users' data. You'll notice now that drop-down combo is gone, and these are the records that she can see. Okay? Now, let me show you how this all works. After all, what we're wanting to do is to be able to create applications fast. So what I'll do is, and if I do control, let me bring that over here. Okay. We have these generic windows in here, and you simply open one up and you do a file save as. Okay, and we're going to call this test B. Test B, and we will put it in the users folder. Okay. So now, believe it or not, most of your work is done. And if you want to add additional columns, you can, but typically this is a browse window for browsing your data. So the few things that we have to do is we have to go to the table and we have to change the content. Now, the paradigm of all these windows uses queries. And the reason why I use queries is they're much faster than having to hand code for hfilter. And you'll also notice we're able to leverage the parameters of the query later on, as we'll show you another window that has a built-in QBE. But we'll grab the query users browse. Okay. And now all I have to do is link my columns to those fields. Right, and we'll do last first. And here's where you would add your additional columns that you have, and you would link them to your query. Okay, so that portion is done with the query. Now what we do is we go over to, excuse me, I need to get to the code of the form. And everything is done here in this procedure called do housekeeping. This is where you have to go and actually change your code, or actually, and I'll show you what these happen to be. This CRUD DB table is the table that we have in the analysis. In other words, this is the underlying table from your query, and we need to know that so we know which table we're going to be reading and writing from when we get to the maintenance form. We have this field called the DB primary key. In other words, what's the primary key of that table in the analysis? And then we have the browse table, and if you leave the table control at the same name, you do not have to change anything here. Okay? And so I just leave it as table generic dot name. We have a default query parameter value, and that's what is the default parameter that you're going to use to run data, and what value is it. So that's our initial, as you know, loading the table control with data. Then we have a SAS query parameter, and this is if you're using that combo box that it displayed, what do you want to what parameter of the query are you using to display that? Okay, then we have a maintenance page, so where are you going to go with your maintenance page? How do you get there? The name of it itself. So let me just do by sleight of hand, put in the finished values. So you can see here, we'll go back to the DB table is users.name. The primary key is users.userid.name. The reason I do this, instead of just like using users within double quotes, or users.userid within double quotes, is when you go to compile, if you've changed the name, or if you've got a spelling that's wrong within your double quotes, you're going to get an error when you run this. This will actually be compared against your analysis and let you say, hey, you don't have that table. So it's just a safety feature and a naming convention that I happen to use. Okay, here is that default query parameter. And we have param_nd underscore greater than equal -1. In other words, what it's going to say is, show me all my records that are greater than a -1. And we see that parameter in a query. And then for the drop down, it's going to be param company ID. And we're going to go to the users table. Okay, it's just that simple. So by defining the table content on the content tab, defining the links on that link tab for all the fields, and then just setting these values here, we now have a fully functional browse window. Right? So now if we would, so we've got this here. Now if we will take this, okay, let's go to our main menu, and we're going to put a button out here, creation, and I'll show you how we can just call that form right away. let's go F2. Grab it. Oh, sorry. F2. By sleight of hand again, we'll put in our code. Okay. And basically we're telling it we just want to use the IW test B window that we just created, and we're going to change our source window to this. So if we've filled in everything properly, and I log in as myself, we'll log in, we'll go to the button here, and there is our table, and then here's our selection. Okay, so now this just selects the data that we want. Now, so I think you can see how simple that is. And actually, let's call that up one more time, make sure that we can get to our record. And we will then call this up, modify a record. Here is the maintenance form. And basically what you do, this is an enhanced maintenance form because I had to do other things in here, but you would just create a window, put your controls on here that you want, and you would drop on this control template, okay? Let's go look at that control template on that maintenance window. Okay. So we're going to go look at when users U. Okay. And this is the same control template here. Okay, this is where all the magic happens. That's the same control template there as we have here. So the application only uses one control template. And what happens is when you're on a browse form, it knows to use the new, the modify, delete, and close. And when you're on the maintenance form, it knows to use the OK and the cancel, right? And at your maintenance form, and let's just show a basic one that doesn't have some of this other, let's go look at company U, okay? So here's a basic maintenance form. So, you know, this framework works really, really, really great for all your code tables. I mean, that will cut you down a whole bunch of time. Now, if you need to do additional coding or additional controls, not a problem. Just go ahead and make your form the way that you need it, and your CRUD control down here will still work, right? And there's no additional code that you have to do because it's automatically done for you by passing parameters from that browse window to here. So in its simplest form, you take a window that we have with a table control on it. We do a file save as. We hook up the table control to the table in the analysis, right? Or the query, and then we link those columns to it. We then go into the code of do housekeeping and set those 5 variables or whatever it happens to be. Create your window here, drop on this control, and you know, you're pretty much done. Okay. Now, let me show you a few things here as we run through this. Now, if you remember, when we logged in as Sylvia, she was only able to see the users table. So we'll go to application settings, we'll go to roles. Actually, let's go back one. Let us go to the user dashboard. Let's look at Sylvia, right? And I know that she's in Alan's company. You'll notice that she is a user, okay? Now if we go and we look at application settings, we go to roles, we look at the user role, right? Here's what she's able to see and to get to. She's able to get to the user dashboard, which lets her get down one level from the main menu, and she's able to access the users table, right? So there's no coding involved with providing security levels. And you can also see we can limit that she can create, read, update, and delete, okay? You notice view all records is not checked, so that's why she doesn't have that combo box where you display and you can pick the companies, okay? Now, if we go back and we look at me, and that will be Glenn's company, you'll notice that I'm an admin, I'm a user, and I'm a framework developer. And how this security roles work is they roll up from the least to the top. So the least access level that I have defined in here is a user, right? Because they can only see the Users tab. Then you would roll up to an admin, right? And that admin can see certain things, and the framework developer can see more things. So knowing that I'm an admin, a user, and a framework developer, if we go to the roles, and now we look at admin, right? So admin lets me get to the company and the employee role and the job, users, all these things. And you'll notice that I can create, read, update, delete, and under company, I can view all records, okay? Now, if I go to framework developer, I actually have more things that I can do, and I can also see the users view all records. That's why I can also get the, the drop-down combo there. So really, if you take all the roles and you put them together so it's a union, that's what you have. You get the highest level of what your security level is. Okay? Hoping that makes sense to all of you. Yeah, what's powerful, yes, it is. And see, what's powerful about that is there's really no coding involved that you have to worry about. As you log into the system from that main menu or that login window, it goes and it gathers all your roles that you have, and then it just puts them in an array as such, and we cycle through. In other words, there's no code that you have to write. It handles it properly, okay? Now, another thing that's really cool within here is the roles that we just looked at. We have business rules at the window level and also at the field level. But before I move into that, I do want to go into the application settings. And so this is at a application level itself, okay? It's not by company, it's for the entire application. And you have a few choices here. You can actually use the authenticated Windows login user, okay? As long as you have them in the system, so once you, because it knows who that user is, then it will go find that user and log them in and give them their specific security rights. Log out at close is really used more if you're going to be using it in an HTML5 browser environment. The latest one we've been using is Thinfinity UI from Cybele Software, which is really doing a good job for us. It lets us take this and run this application on any device, basically. Anything that can have a browser that's got HTML5. The other thing we have here is display the dashboard on startup, so we'll show that. And we also have something called update my profile email. So let's go ahead and select the startup for the dashboard. Okay, let's stop this from running. We will now log in. Okay, I'll come in as me. Okay, now you'll notice that the dashboard comes up. And this is just totally customizable. You can put, it doesn't even have to be a dashboard. This is just going to be a different screen. But the dashboard makes sense because you can show different metrics of what's going on with the data in your program or different areas of the program. And this basically, you know, this is just the dashboard from PCSoft as the example. So it was really simple to put in here, and then it's for you to customize how you want it to be. The other setting that we saw in there was under my profile, and we had update my email as false. And the reason we do this, and it's up to you to implement this or not. Again, no coding involved, but our user ID when we log in is going to be the email of the person. So we make sure it's specific. And the question is, do we want them to be able to update that email and change that user ID? And if the answer is yes, well, you can go ahead and do that. And so let's go back to our application settings, go back to update my profile. We'll take off the dashboard. We'll stop this from running. And I'll log back in as myself. And now you'll notice that, well, now you'll notice that the email can be changed here. Now, one thing that I want to talk about, because you see this flashing control at the bottom, it said password may be reset at the login window. let me go ahead and describe a couple things that's happening as we log in here. So the user email, you saw how that works. Our password, we do not store passwords within the application. I mean, even today with how security conscious a lot of the companies are, how many times do you see during the week or the month a news broadcast that some large company's data has been hacked, and what's been exposed? Their possible social security numbers, which they shouldn't be storing, and their passwords. So what we do for the password is we just store the hash code. And so you can't easily reverse engineer a hash code into a password. In fact, I can't even take a hash code, I can't even take the same hash code to compare it to itself and say, are these the same? Because it doesn't work that way. We have to take the hash code, then we have to take the value and the key and perform an operation on it and say, hey, does this match what the hash code would be if it were generated? And again, it's not any code that you have to write. We've taken care of that for you. So the big thing is no passwords being stored. Okay. So let's go in here. Okay. And let's go to the user. Let's go to new user. Okay. I must select a company. Okay. See how smart this is? I may not be, but the program is. So we'll select Alan's company. We'll do a new user. And now you'll see that here's where we've got our password. So until you save this the first time, right, you can put in a password and say, nah, not that password. Put it in, put it in, put it in. But as soon as the record is saved, it then is saved as the hash code, right? So the user logs in, they enter their information. It compares it, say, does this match for hash codes? Now, that hash, yeah. That is correct. Yeah, yeah. And the hash code, and say even someone were able to break a hash code and work it back into a password, they would then have the algorithm for every other person's or users in your application to be able to figure out what their password is. However, what we do is we take the password, we take the user ID, and the user ID is actually the key that we use for generating that hash code. So every single person has got a different key value for generating that passcode. Okay? Now, looking at the screen with these grayed fields, you'll notice that those gray with the red border, those are required fields, right? And so you don't need to code this for yourself. And you'll notice, and the requirement here is just that it's required. Now, if you know how PCSoft does their required fields, it's what we call as hard-coded. In other words, once you're in that field, you can't get off of that field until you fill in some value. Well, that may or may not be a good thing to do. And for me, I figure, no, that's not the way I want to work. So what we do is we just let you fill in any value, right? Okay, and they can be validated by a business rule later also. So you'll notice as soon as I put this in, right, and we'll just put this in, and we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to go and save this, right? The email doesn't look like it's a good email, but we'll just say okay, and hopefully we'll see what's going to happen. The syntax of the address is incorrect. Okay, so it just does a check for us, right? Even though it's not required anymore because it's got a good value, the email itself is not valid. Now, let me show you how easy it is to add a required field. Okay, so let's just close this. We'll go to Application Settings. We're going to go to Field Level Business Rules. And I'm going to go and create a new one. Okay, and I'm going to select the Users table, because that's the table we're working with in that maintenance form. And I'm going to select the phone, move it across, and I'm going to say it's active and it's required. Okay, so we'll just say okay. Now when we go to the user dashboard, right, we go to Alan's company, we do new. Now you'll notice that the phone is required. So I mean, really, how cool is that? That you can make required fields just by selecting a table and a field. Now, What's implied with field level business rules is any other maintenance form that you have that deals with the first name, the last name, whatever it happens to be, whatever field it deals with, that will become a required field on those forms. That's why we call them field level. Okay, now you're saying, well, maybe I don't want that to happen, or I have specific needs that the requires could change depending on some value or some calculations have to happen. Well, we also have window level business rules. So now you can actually go in, write your own business rule, okay, and assign it to a window, and then you can tell it it's going to run when the window initializes. You can run it when anything changes in the window, so you could check another field, see what's happening, or run at record save. Now, this is really a foolish business rule, but what it proves is if the first name is equal to Glenn, then the last name is going to be invisible. Okay? Well, we'll go look at that, see how that happens, but sometimes there's need to be able to proper case or uppercase a field, and so you could actually write your own code here, and you can say if it's this field, then go ahead and uppercase it or proper case it if you have a function for that. So you're only limited to what you can write with W language code. Now, that being said, you better be really careful who you give access to be able to create business rules. Okay, so let's close this. A good point. All you have to do is distribute that data file out there, as you're saying, and not have to recreate a whole new other application. Now, even with knowing how business rules work, what I do, though, is I will go into the application, I will put a button or behind the code somewhere, I will write the code to make sure that it works, right? Then I'll copy that code and I'll put it in as a business rule. Just that way I get my syntax right, I've got the right field names, the right control names, whatever it happens to be. But you can make those really, really powerful, and then take that data file, put it back up on your server, and voila, you're good to go. So let's go to the users. Let's go here. I'm going to call me up here, and Glenn, and we'll do modify. Okay, and I may. Oh, I wonder. I got to go back, and this may be one of the. Oh, that's why. Okay, modify. Is that the one right here? If it's Glenn, okay. I was wondering why it wasn't working. Is because I don't have it as active. Okay. Now, if I go back in as Glenn, and I select these records again, select mine, you'll notice that that field disappeared, right? So just imagine, instead of being invisible, you could make it something else, okay? Yeah. Okay, let us look at, just go over these again. We've got the application setting the roles, the business rules here, right? How we're changing the ribbon bar for the examples, additional tabs, or the fields here. In fact, this is a good thing. Let me show you how security is used within here. And again, it's not any coding that you need to do. Actually, we know that when Sylvia logged in, she was not able to see the company. Correct, but I can. So let's go log in as her again, and then we'll look and see why is she not able to see company. All right, so you'll see company is gone from here. So let's close this. Let's go to the main menu. Let's go behind the company image here, and we have something really simple. Okay. I have a choice of either not displaying the control or just graying it out so people can't select it. It's up to you. You just select either of these lines. We have something called role access, and it's the ribbon bar group examples company. Okay, and I'll show you how that is. And then we're going to use the company table. If you remember, when we looked at her role, she was a user, and in that user role, you could not access company, right? So that's done behind the scenes. This runs, it compares it against her roles that she has, and then it either is going to make it visible or invisible. Our option is gray or not gray. So we've got the ribbon bar examples company, right? If we go into our ribbon bar, and I've got to see, here's our ribbon bar, here are our examples, and here is our examples company, okay? So we're just using groups, right, that are within the ribbon bar itself, okay? So that's how security is done. It's all handled for you behind the scenes. Oh, one more thing. Let me show you, because I just showed you the simplest window that we have. Okay? We have 3 different types of windows, and I'm actually working on some more. But if we go to users, and that was the one, right, with just the table control and the drop-down combo. Okay. We actually have one where you would still have this, the drop-down, so you can select the company. But now we let you actually build, so you manually within your IDE, you would add additional fields in here that you want to build a QBE on. So you could search on last name, first name, company, those kinds of things, right? And of course, there's a little bit of code that you have to write, because you're going to have to write the code that goes against the parameters. And that's really simple for those of you who have been doing WinDev. Just using parameters within a query is so much simpler than having to write everything for your H filters. So this is the second way of doing this. So this is a window again that you would take a file, save as, do the same things. You always hook up your table control to your query, and then go in and change those 5 default or 4 default lines of code that we have. We also have a one for a QBE. Now this leverages your parameters in your query. So I'll select the records, but now here's what we've got are all these fields. These happen to be parameters in the query itself. We'll go look at those. And you actually just put in a value. So if I want to put, let's look for last name W, find it. Okay, there we go. We clear it. All those are gone, but it still defaults to what we have up here for the company. Now, these are the parameters of the query. So let's go look at that, since everything in our application is based on queries. So there's a little bit of work that you have to do. But you know, in WinDev, queries are really simple to code, right? Either code them or you generate them. So let's look at the query users browse. Okay. So here's the fields that I select, but more importantly, these are the parameters that show up in my QBE. And what we do is we will go ahead and get rid of the word param, so you don't see that. And then wherever there is an underscore, we replace it with a space. So you'll see it where it says, where it's user ID, company ID, last name, first name, right? We also have one, and this is kind of cool right here, param nd underscore greater than. So if you remember, we had seen one that showed greater than. And what we do is, again, we get rid of the param nd underscore, so you don't see that. But here's the key. If you don't want to see that in your list of parameters in your QBE, if you name it param nd, it will not be displayed, whereas all the other parameters will be displayed. Okay? So it becomes really powerful that you don't have to do any additional coding. we take the advantage of the query and the parameters and put those in that table. And again, that's not any coding that you do. So if you need to be able to search on another criteria, just add it within the query itself. Okay? Now, this may be a dangerous thing to show, but it looks like, because I just started this, but there's another paradigm that I'm thinking of implementing, and I'm really just about there. If we do the login and we go to the user's dashboard, this whole time you've been seeing us using table controls. Well, I know there's times that you actually want to use a looper, and some people are having trouble with loopers, understanding what they do or how to code them. So here's an example of a looper. Okay. Now, I'm still trying to say, to figure out what do we do when you don't just have any records to display at first. And of course, that only happens because we're using our criteria here. So for right now, I've come up with this, where it tells you to select an item from here. Okay. So we'll select this. We'll do Alan's Company. Here's our looper. We will be able to create a new record, modify one, or delete it. Okay. So now if I go to Glenn's Company, you'll see that it changes. If we go back to make the selection, it tells us this. But then I was also trying to figure out, what do you do when you have one that doesn't return any records? Okay. So I think it's very informative that what's happening, but I need to see if we can somehow pretty this up so it looks better. But anyway, that's the direction I'm taking the framework now. And we'll see about adding other functionality later. And as I said in the beginning, we will have additional videos to follow, and those will be short, because that's where we can say, somebody will ask, how do you do this specific thing? So how do you build that maintenance form? We'll go in and build it. How do you create a business rule to do something? And of course, I can't cover all business rules, but I'll show you how we build them, and then it'd be kind of up to you to how you want to code that yourself. So really, outside of business rules where you're coding, but you're not coding in the application, it's just the meta layer. Pretty much a lot of things are done for you in this application, in this framework. And so, you know, a good starting point would be to take this framework, copy it to another folder, rename it if you have to, and then go ahead and start this as your application and add additional functionality in here. You put your icons out here and your static controls, and you give somebody access to that through the functionality of the assigning the roles. Again, no code involved with that on your part. And you really start having a really solid application. The thing I want to show you just to push this point home is if we look at let's go over to the users browse. Okay, users browse here. And again, I want to push this point home. This was actually the very beginning point of the framework. And I had been using control templates for a long time, because what this does is, I'm going to call this a visual OOP. What this does is this lets you reuse this on all the forms, right? And all you set are those 4 or 5 variables, and your CRUD is completely written for you. You don't have to do anything. So for those of you who are familiar, and maybe those who aren't familiar, since it's a control template, if I open this up, this takes us to the template itself, right? You'll notice here's our buttons that we have. We have all our code behind it, right? And you'll also notice that we have all these procedures down here. I'm going to call these stub procedures. And for those of you actually who have come from other languages, they might be known as like an embed point. So I just give you a place where you can embed your own code. And if we will now close this, and we will go to the user U, and I select the control template, you'll notice that I actually have one that I overrode here. And so if I do F2, I can write any specific code that I want to override what's happening in the control template. In other words, if I didn't want this to work up here, you know, to be executed, I would comment out execute ancestor, right? But I've got specific stuff that I need to run. So it's easy to take the form, the save as, do what you need to do. Now, if you have something special that you need to code for, you'll notice that we have all these embed points. We can, before we apply the CRUD down here, we can apply the business rule. We can add after. Do we need something to happen there? Because this is a perfect point that if you're going to save child records, you could do something here. So I just wanted to show you how we leverage control templates, and we have one control template. It's not that you even have to worry about two. We have one, and it knows which way to work on this form, because this would be OK and cancel, and our browse would be the top ones. So I think in so far at this point, a 41-minute nutshell, right? It's not a small one, but we've gone through most of the functionality of what's in the framework. Alan, do you have any points that you think I missed or questions? Or what do you think for the users? Exactly. Good. Well, I'm hoping you all enjoyed this, and the framework will be released today, and I will post this on the Facebook group and also in my www.wxtraining.us site, and we'll be making more videos, so watch out for those in the future. Thanks for your time.